and we'll learn how to taxi to the runway and take off. Before we taxi out though, let's set up a few more items that we did not cover in the cold start lesson. Press spacebar when you're... Now we're ready to get moving. Press the nose wheel steering or air refueling disconnect button on your stick, or press the S key. This will enable nose wheel steering and allow you to control your path using the rudder pedals. The nose wheel steering and air refueling light right at the HUD should illuminate to indicate nose wheel steering is engaged. Press spacebar to continue. To get rolling, slowly increase the throttle just past idle until you have forward movement. Then return the throttle to idle. Gently test the brakes and nose wheel steering immediately after your aircraft begins to move forward. Press Z to steer left and X to steer right. Taxi forward and turn right on the taxiway. Okay, now we're on our way. Max taxi speed in F-16 is about 30 knots, but be sure to slow down to about 10 knots for turns. Heat may build up quickly if the brakes are used for an extended period, so do not ride the brakes to control taxi speed. Use one firm application of the toe brakes to slow the aircraft if you need to. Idle and only advance it if you need to speed up. Let's turn left and hold short of the runway. Come to a stop as you approach the runway, and we'll make sure the aircraft is ready for takeoff. Apply the brakes and hold right here. A series of last-minute checks need to be made just prior to entering the runway. Some airfields have arm, de-arm areas you may be temporarily parked at to keep the aircraft clear of other traffic. You may also perform these checks while parked on the taxiway, as we are now. Press spacebar. First, set the probe heat switch to probe heat. This should be done at least 2 minutes prior to takeoff if icing conditions exist. Delay selection of probe heat as long as possible prior to takeoff if icing is not expected to prevent overheat and damage to probe components. Next, verify the Alt flap switch is set to normal. Then, just inboard the manual trim panel, check the needles on the trim indicators are centered. This is the final verification the trim settings are correct for takeoff but have not been inadvertently changed. Center them if you need to using the trim knobs or the trim controls on your stick. Press spacebar to continue. Now, verify the engine control switch is set to pry and the guard is down. Verify your speed brakes are closed and the canopy is closed and locked. The yellow handle should be down and the canopy warning light on the right eyebrow should be off. Press spacebar to continue. Set the stores configuration switches required. In general, set Cat 1 for air-to-air loadouts without external wing tanks. Set Cat 3 for air-to-ground loadouts or any loadouts with external wing tanks. We have external fuel tanks and air-to-ground stores loaded, so set it to Cat 3. Press spacebar to continue. Next, we'll verify the external fuel tanks are feeding. Set the fuel quantity select knob to external wing and check the quantity. Wing external tank should feed first and have lower quantity than at engine start, somewhere just below 2,400 pounds. If a centerline external tank were installed, it would feed first and we'd have to check its quantity instead. Press spacebar to continue. Set the fuel quantity select knob to internal wing and check the quantity. The internal wing tanks are fed from externals and should be full, or about 550 pounds. Press spacebar to continue. Now, set the fuel quantity select knob back to normal. This allows the automatic forward fuel transfer system, trap fuel warning, and bingo fuel warning to operate properly. Press spacebar to continue. Stow the targeting pod if installed by selecting the targeting pod control page on the MFD and selecting standby. This is done prior to takeoff and before landing to prevent foreign object damage to components. Press spacebar to continue. Then, lower the ejection safety lever. This arms the ejection seat and allows ejection when the ejection handle is pulled. This is delayed as long as possible to prevent inadvertent ejection on the ground. Egresses through other means is usually preferable. Press spacebar to continue. Last, check that the engine oil pressure is reading normal between 15 and 65 psi and all caution and warning lights are out. Press spacebar to continue. At this point, we are ready to take the runway. Go ahead and taxi out and turn left to line up on the center line. Come to a stop and we'll run a quick lineup check and walk through the takeoff sequence. Okay, roll forward until you're lined up with the runway and hold the brakes. Verify the parking brake is disengaged and the anti-skid switch is set to anti-skid. This will prevent the brakes from locking onto the tires so you need to abort the takeoff and come to a stop quickly. Press spacebar to continue. This is going to go quickly, so I will describe the entire sequence, then we will run through it step by step. First comes the lineup check. You will keep the brakes held, run the engine up to 90% RPM, and check for normal indications on your engine instruments. You will release the brakes and increase throttle to maintain track down the runway using the rudder pedals and ZNX. You will disengage the nose wheel steering about 70 knots when the rudder becomes effective. As you approach your takeoff speed, 170 knots in this case, pull gently back and raise the nose about 10 degrees. You can use the gun cross and the pitch light on the HUD as a guide. The aircraft will become airborne and start to climb. Raise the landing gear while still below 300 knots and then continue to fly the aircraft along the runway heading. If you're ready, let's go ahead and give it a try. I will talk you through it as we go. Press spacebar to continue. Okay, hold the brakes, W, and advance the throttle to 90% RPM. Check the engine instruments for hydraulic oil pressure warning light off, oil pressure between 25 and 65 psi, F-tip 935 degrees or less, hydraulic A and B pressure between 2850 and 3250 psi. Then, release the brakes and advance the throttle to full. Now, use gentle rudder inputs, ZNX, to maintain track down the runway. Disengage nose wheel steering, S. We are approaching takeoff speed. Gently pull back on the stick to raise the nose about 10 degrees. Okay, we are airborne. Raise the landing gear, G. You will lose a little lift as the trailing edge flaps retract, so be sure to maintain the climb. Now, maintain your current heading and reduce throttle slightly. Congratulations, you have just taken off in a Viper. We will pick up next time for a look at landing. You can end the lesson now by pressing the escape key or continue to fly around.
Altitude. Altitude.
そんなにパワーあるわけでもないのかな。 ピード感がないだけか、結構スピード出てるってこと？
Altitude. Altitude. Pull up. Pull up. Altitude. 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 Altitude.
フラップどこだ？
altitude, altitude.
OK。画面が暗いからなー。よし。完了。